Very good. Okay, so I got the floor. So, wow, what a change in the weather. It's been rainy and cold and snowy. Snowed a week and a half ago. Now it's going to be 85 for a few days. It's May, what is today? Let's see, May 10th. We still got pussy willows blooming, and dandelions, but that's, yeah, it's a bit of an overlap. Uh, so you guess you got to ride with it this year and see what we get. So,
Hey, Mike, can you do us a huge favor and really speak up loud for us?
yeah,
That would
okay.
be great.
Yeah, all right.
Thanks.
Let me see if I got my volume up. I mean, maybe I do. Thought I did. Anyway, okay, so anyway, this talk is called the Brood Factory, and it's the brood factories are really support my apiary in all parts of my apiary. And I think without my brood factories, I don't really know what I'd do. I'd have to be buying bees, or in a bad year, I don't know. So anyway, I hope by the end of the of my talk, you understand the importance of brood factories to my operation, and start thinking about maybe this is where you should be getting your brood for splits and queens and whatever. Okay. Oh, yes, you got to use the arrow. Okay. So what is a brood factory? Well, a brood factory is a hive of bees.
Hey, Mike, we're having a little bit of a problem at this second, so hold your presentation for a few minutes while we get you back on the screen, and we'll be right back to you.
Yep.
Mike?
Yeah,
Hey, Mike, you there?
I'm here.
Ah, it's Landy. I just wanted to say hi.
Yep.
And we can't hear you.
Really. My microphone is
I need
not
a little
muted.
technical help here.
Yeah,
Somebody,
okay.
Adriana, Jerry is coming over, so don't touch anything else. Hang in there.
Oh yeah. Biscuit. I got some. Come here. Lie down. Want a biscuit? Here. Eat your biscuit. Get that biscuit. Yeah, the biscuit. Good boy. Get that one.
Mike, we are ready to go yet again. We have the volume up here, and if you wouldn't mind continuing, we'd love to finish
Yeah.
the presentation. Oh, and we
Test,
hear you beautifully. Thank you.
test.
Testing is fantastic. You did it.
Excellent. Okay, fine. I didn't do anything.
Oh, great.
So anyway, yep, we'll start this again in case you didn't hear it. So this talk is called the Brood Factory, and it's brood factories are what supports my apiary, all parts of my apiary, and it's so important that I think it's really the most. It, it's everything to me. So I hope by the end of this talk you'll understand that. So what is a brood factory? Well, a brood factory is a hive of bees that its only purpose in life is to produce frames of brood for the apiary to be used wherever needed in the apiary. It's the sole purpose. It's not for making honey. It's for making brood or whatever, cell building, nuke making, boosting production hives. Oh yes, I use the arrow. Frames like this. This comb of brood is going to be a lot of bees in a hurry. You can see it's already emerging. There's emerging bees, and so there's thousands of bees when this frame fully emerges. So adding this to your project is going to increase the population, which is key to beekeeping. Is controlling the population. Can any style of beehive be a brood factory? Yeah, of course. What style beehive do you use? I mean, you'd want the frames in the brood factory to match the frames in your operation. If you use deep Langstroth, you'd certainly want to have your brood factories be deep Langstroth. If you're mediums, you do mediums. If you have, I imagine, if you have a Warre or some other kind of hive, a top bar or any kind like that, you can still use the combs of brood to be used in the apiary. Yes. Brood factories are nothing new. Of course, I thought I was pretty cute in inventing it, but it's like so many other things that I've done. I didn't invent anything. Um, I may have invented it for my own self, but anyway. So Brother Columban at Buckfast Abbey, he was Brother Adams' mentor. In 1900, he devised a beehive that would hold 4 nucleus colonies, and in the spring, he used the excess brood to boost his honey production colonies. Brood factory. So it's really nothing new. I'm sure that if you look back in history, you'd find somebody else that did a similar thing. Now, I like my brood factories to be in a nucleus configuration. That would be vertical. What's the difference between vertical and horizontal? Well, a 10-frame Langstroth or a top bar hive is horizontal, whereas nucleus colonies are vertical. What's the natural cavity of our European honeybee? A tree. Trees don't grow horizontally; they grow vertically. And so our bees are really designed to be I think, in a vertical configuration. Now, why is this important in in brood factories? Obviously, we keep our bees in 10 frame Langstroths, then they're certainly going to move horizontally, and they certainly are successful, and they make honey crops, and you can split them and do all kinds of things, and that works fine. Well, I'm trying to raise as much brood as I can and as quickly as I can. And so in the horizontal configuration, to raise brood in combs to the side of the brood nest out towards the walls, you have to be able to warm those combs and clean those combs before the queen can lay in them. And so to expand horizontally, that means you have to increase the population. And how do you do that? Well, by having brood. So there's sort of a catch-22 there. They can't get out there until they have the bees, and they can't have the bees until they get out there. So, but in a vertical configuration, in my case, each nucleus colony has only 4 combs, so it's only 4 combs wide, and several boxes tall. Gosh, they don't have to go horizontal at all. The heat rises. There's only 4 combs wide, and I just think that they occupy combs quicker. The queen lays in these combs more quickly. So that's why I prefer the vertical configuration. Now this is a good one. I like. This is really one of the reasons why I wanted to put something together. So once I started talking about double nukes, bee supply companies quickly took it up and called it the resource hive. I think only Better Bee they were the only ones that ever gave credit to me or Kirk Webster for introducing this. But anyway, so they all called it a resource hive. And if you go and look at some YouTubes or presentations or something, or listen to somebody talking about their resource hives, it's basically a resource hive, a nucleus colony, a spare nuke, whatever it is in the apiary for an emergency, to save a colony of bees that went queenless, that's a drone layer, that whatever it is. So it's a one-to-one thing. You have a resource hive and you save a beehive. But brood factories are so much more than that. We just harvest so much brood and make so many cell builders and nucleus colonies, and so it can be way more than a one-to-one thing. And I just thought I'd put that out there along with the videos and everything about resource hives. So we've talked about the vertical configuration of why I like my brood factories to be in nucleus colonies. Another reason. So in the same footprint of a 10 frame Langstroth, on the bottom layer, I have a divided 10 frame with a nucleus colony on either side, and then for a half width or 4 frame supers above. So I can have 2 queens laying in the same footprint as a 10 frame Langstroth, where if I just had 10 frame Langs pulling brood out of each one, it would take me twice as many, uh, twice as much space, twice as many beehives, twice as much equipment to have the same number of queens laying. So this is really great for me, maximizing the number of queens laying to make brood for me, and the ease of handling. So about the heaviest box you'll ever have to pick up in this situation is about 25 pounds. I don't even think you'd make 30 pounds in a 4 frame nuke. 25, that's full of honey. That's heavy. That's the heavy end. So the ease in handling, it has a lot to do with it. So what do we use them for? Oh, here we go. If somebody's got a motorcycle down the road. So anyway, we use them for boosting weak colonies. So you have a weak colony, and they could use the addition of a frame or two of emerging brood. It comes from brood factories. Strengthening cell builders. Well, we make really strong cell builders. I believe that the quality of the queen is the quality of the cell, and the quality of the cell comes from all the royal jelly and all the nurse bees. And how do we grow nurse bees? Brood factories. And we use them for starting our nucleus colonies mid-June to mid-July. So boosting weak or slow colonies. So I coined a phrase a number of years ago called a bee bomb. So I would harvest frames of brood from the brood factories and put it on the bottom board below, and bees, of course, and put it on the bottom board below a slow colony. And when that brood emerged, it's like a bomb went off, and the thing has instant population. So that's how you do that. Now, of course, there's always the queen issue. So, but first you need to boost the population. Then once you boost the population, perhaps you requeen. And so I'm talking about adding combs of brood like this that emerge into thousands of bees. And that all comes from brood factories. Same thing. Strengthening cell builders. Well, the slide on the left is a cell builder. The bottom three boxes are the queen's brood nest, and the two tan boxes are medium supers for honey. One is elevated over an excluder, no queen. On top of that, we put a box of two frames of honey, one on the outside of each sidewall, and 7 frames of emerging brood. It's important that this be emerging brood because you trying to grow nurse bees for the graft in 10 days, and so you want as many young bees in this as you can get. So that's why it has to be emerging bee. It can't be purple eye, can't be pointy pupae, just early pupae. Has to be emerging. And so 10 days later, um, the unit is used as a cell builder. So the top 2 boxes, the green box and the first super, are removed. The queen-right colony is placed on the grass, on the ground, behind the original location, 180 degrees turned around, so it's facing the opposite direction. A new bottom board is given, and the cell builder is added, the medium and the deep. And through some manipulations, of course, you can't have any queen. I don't like to have any open brood. I do this 10 days before grafting, so there is no open brood. There can't be any emergency cells. You can't graft into a colony that's already got cells in it. So we set this up, and then we shake the core of the brood nest out of the queen right section of the hive through a queen excluder. You can see the shaker box here in the background. Through a queen excluder and into the cell builder, which is now hopelessly queenless. There's no queen. There are no larvae from which to raise a queen. Excuse me. There are no cells. And look at the population. So they've got the core of the brood nest, which is where most of the nurse bees are in this colony, in the queen right colony. And they've got the field force. So you set this thing up, and in the afternoon you come back and you give it the graft. And there's so many bees in there that you put the graft in the space next to the pollen comb, and you can let it go, and it just sort of kind of floats down as the bees move out of the way. But this is what I'm talking about: building a population like this for quality cell builders. And where do all those bees come from? Well, you know that where they come from. They come from brood factories. So the quality of the queen cells is all about the royal jelly. How many nurse bees there are to pack those cups with jelly for that larva and that pupa. so much jelly that on the day of harvesting the cells, there's still jelly, like this one. You see, those are really, really lovely cells. And look at the cups. You know, these aren't day 10. These are probably day 6 or something after graft. Just recently sealed. When I harvest them on day 10 after grafting, put them into mating nukes, there's still jelly in those cups. So I know that those pupae had more jelly than they could ever consume, which is the whole idea. And how do you max the amount of royal jelly in the queen cells? Of course, by building nurse bee population. And you do that by adding frames of emerging brood long enough ahead of time so that those bees are nurse bees, are old enough to be nurse bees. And that brood, of course, comes from brood factories. Starting nucleus colonies. So we use brood factories as a brood source for starting our nucleus colonies every year. Now, so that you better can understand what I'm talking about, we came up with a template, and I can populate nuke boxes with these templates, and so you can see the progression of what we do and how the bees progress in the brood factory. So this is a double nuke. The gray line in the middle is the divider. These are 2 nucleus colonies. They have entrances on the opposite sides, so they're totally separate colonies. They can't cross over or under or around the divider. And when we set them up, for an example, we set this thing up with 2 nukes, and we'll give it a queen later. And we set it up with a frame of honey, a frame of mixed brood, eggs, larvae, sealed brood, frame of capped brood, and an empty comb, and enough bees to cover the brood and maybe the honey, or onto the honey. The reason we put a mixed brood in there is because capped brood doesn't hold bees well. So sometimes when you make these nukes with just capped brood, they'll lose bees to a different nuke in the yard. We make them up sometimes 50 at a time and put them all in one yard somewhere. And so sometimes some of them will lose bees drifting over to nucleus colonies that smell better or whatever. But by adding that mixed brood, that holds the bees in the nuke when we make them. So this is a typical setup of what we do. How many did we make? We made 300, over 350 last year. All from brood factories. Something like this. So we set them up, we make them in single boxes, we take them out, we give them the queens, and 10 days later, 12 days later at the maximum, we remove the queen cages, we check to see she's laying, and we put a second story on. And then later in the summer, before the goldenrod flow, they're really getting strong, you get that hot, humid weather, they will abscond, they will swarm. So when they start getting like that, getting plugged and start to see some cups with eggs or something like that, we add another 4 frame super between the top and the bottom box. I know that seems severe, but it isn't. And they very well respond to it, and it shuts off queen swarming just quick. So that works very well for us. And we have the flow, and then they shut down. We get a very early shutdown here. And where does all that brood come from? Of course it does, brood factories. So how I got started with brood factories? Well, I needed brood for starting cell builders and creating nucleus colonies. And where am I going to get that brood? Well, I could get it from production hives, which I did for quite a while before I wised up. So here's a nice yard where they're making a decent honey crop, and I want to take a nuke out of each one, say a honey and a mixed brood and an open brood. I mean, I still cap. Fine. So here we go. Here's hive number 7. It's got a deep here. I should be able to get it out of that deep, but unfortunately, I have to take off 4 supers of honey to do it. And then I replace the combs I took out, and I have to put those 4 supers back on again. And look at this one over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to take 6 supers off to get down to that deep. Wow, that's a lot of work. You know, back when it didn't matter. I was a lot younger. I did that, but it's silly to lift all that weight, trying to find places to get brood from. Well, then I sort of popularized this in my early talks. How about sacrificing non-productive hives? Well, that works pretty well. Here's a decent crop in this yard, but there's a colony here that's non-productive. So when you look at it, you look at the combs, the brood is healthy. It's just maybe it's the queen, you know. They don't have a disease, so you can use the brood and the bees. So I would get rid of the queen, sacrifice all the bees and brood in that non-productive hive to make nucleus colonies. That worked quite well. Of course, I lost a hive. If I had another source for brood and I could requeen that colony, perhaps I could have a better colony maybe for next year, but whatever. I'm losing a colony. Well, then I started overwintering nucleus colonies, and there's always some strong ones and there's always some weak ones. So this is a picture of the original nuke box I used. It had a movable division board feeder. Each nuke had an entrance to one of the 2 chambers. This one on the right side and this one on this one side here. And so I could remove this nucleus colony, queen, make sure the queen is gone, and get all the brood and the bees out best I could. But this one wasn't so strong. This one wasn't ready to transfer. So let's use that one for a brood factory. So then I'd move the feeder over to the side and add 4 more combs. And the ones that weren't too far gone would build into those 4 combs. And then at splitting time or nuke making time, I'd use them for making nucleus colonies. And that worked pretty good for a weak or a slow nuke. And I still do that today. But too often it seemed that those weaker ones back then when I was still dealing with chalk brood had chalk brood. And so they had it so bad they were stinky rotten with it, some of them. And so those aren't going to produce me anything. They're worthless. I can't make nucleus colonies out of that. And then eventually I started making so many nucleus colonies every summer that I didn't have enough weak ones to be my brood's source. Well, what about sacrificing some nice, strong, overwintered ones, super them as needed, and then use the brood and bees for making cell builders, and then nucleus colonies? That seemed like a pretty good plan. There wasn't any chalk brood in there. There were really strong. Why not use those? Why not split those up? You know, so here's a strong overwintered nucleus colony. There's 4 nukes here, 2 in each box. We're at dandelion time. Maybe later dandelion time. I see some up here. The grass isn't cut yet. Must be in May, but look at the population already. They're exploding already. So I took those and I'd harvest brood and I put combs back in, and I'd harvest brood and I put combs back in. And then eventually I just harvested and harvested and harvested till they were all gone. So the first time I did this was 2011. I had 50 overwintered nucleus colonies. From May 9th to June 19th, I harvested 245 frames of brood and made 35 cell builders. And that was enough. That gave me enough queens to make my nucleus colonies. And then with what was left, I totally sacrificed them. So what was left in bees and brood, we made 330 nucleus colonies, which is a crazy number. And I'll say I've never done it again. I've never equaled that. But the thing is that that year I sacrificed them. So I used everything. I didn't leave anything behind. I got rid of that queen. I used every bit of brood and bees I could find over 2 months' time. And when I was done, I had nothing left, but I had 330 nucleus colonies all stocked with my queens. But the 50 nucleus colonies were gone. They were sacrificed. And I kind of thought that was a waste. So the following year, I had a more conservative plan. So I began with apiaries of strong nucleus colonies like this one. And instead of starting to sacrifice them, I started to build them up. So this is what they look like coming out of winter. This is typical. They're not, everyone isn't like this. I tried to make them a little bit different, a little bit different how they have their brood situated in their each nuke. But you can see one has 2 frames of brood honey and one has 1. So one's a little lighter than the other. But look at this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames of brood. And this one's got 1, 2, 4 frames of it. So this one's going to be requiring more. So, okay. So they used an extra comb of honey. Just something typical, not written in stone that they're going to be like this. I just wanted to show you um, what they look like coming out of winter when they're in double, when they're 2 stories high in a double box. Then we add brood to them. Excuse me, tired, long day. Um, we add comb to them so they'll expand, and you can see where we put the empty comb. Okay, suppose we have this one back again, and we have to put a box of combs on them because they're expanding. I mean, can we just put it on top? Yeah, we could put it on top. What do you think is going to happen to a box of 4 combs on top of this strong nest on a flow? Well, they're going to put nectar in it. Are they going to put brood in it? No, probably not. Maybe some. Some will. Most won't. So instead of just adding comb to the top, I kind of work my way, work it into each nucleus colony. So let me talk about that gray divider line in the middle, separating the 2 nucleus colonies. C.C. Miller in boy about 1891 wrote about wintering nucleus colonies in double boxes like this, and they form one cluster as if a divider board was shoved down between them. It's exactly what we've seen coming out when it's cold out, coming out of winter. They form two semicircles with the divider as their center. Well, thinking that way, I think that the two combs against the divider is the center of her brood nest. So rather than putting all the empty combs above her brood nest, we try to work 2 empty combs into the center of her brood nest. So now the way we do this zigzag method, we have 2 combs in the center of her brood nest against the divider, and then up above we put 2 combs towards the outside. Yes, of course they're going to put nectar there, but the 2 empty combs that we put next to the divider look above and to the side and below, and what do you see? Brood, 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 all so those empty combs are surrounded by brood. She's gonna go in there, that's the center of her brood nest, and that will be brood in a hurry. In a week, there's eggs. Less than that, there's eggs and larvae, and just she jumps right on those. I'm gonna get rid of one side, though, because this is getting confusing. We don't need to look at 2 sides at once. We can just deal with one side. So here's what it looks like when we added a 3rd story of 4 combs to the double nuke, double story nuke. And so we start building them up. And we build them up as needed the same way. What we were doing today, we are adding supers, 4 comb supers to the brood factories in one of the yards, and I only had 2 people, so it took us all day, but we reversed, cleaned the bottom boards, and worked a a third story or a fourth story or even a fifth story, because some of them are so strong. They wintered in 3, and adding one more isn't going to make it. So you add one more and then put another one up on top, and just the populations are huge in some of these. 10 frames of brood in a 3-story nuke is not going to be there long if you don't do something. But that's what we're doing. We're building them up, trying to keep them in the boxes so that when we start harvesting brood, we can keep ahead of them. We harvest enough brood so they won't swarm, but not so much they dwindle. And that's the key. Taking what they'll give you, but enough so next time around it's not too late and they've gone. So harvesting brood for Selva. So this is that same comb. This is we built a double-story nuke into 3 stories. Same way. A picture of some of my help harvesting frames of brood. So we get going early. May 9th is usually the day we start setting up our first cell builders, so that we can have mated queens June 13th. So it's a long process. And what a spring. So you try it. I know Landy already gave up for a week, maybe. Well, me too. So they're not ready, and I'm not going to get them going. But anyway, you can see there's no leaves. There might be a couple of poplar leaves. That's it. So we get going early. Harvesting emerging brood. And so we've built these brood factories up into 3, and now it's time to start pulling some brood out of them. So the one on the left is on the right hand double nuke box. The left hand one is stronger than the right hand. The right hand one, you see the bag. So this was only a 2-story. Didn't need a third when I put a third on. So I put this grain bag in between. So above it is an empty box, just so the lid will be level, and put the lid on. If they need room later, we take the bag out and we zigzag some combs in and there. But so I take the left-hand one apart, which is the one I'm going to pull some brood out of, and I just put it on an upturned cover on the nuke next to us, or if it's too tall, put a cover on a box like this, and then just put them on that, and so we can keep them in order and on the ground. And so if I'm going to pull some emerging brood from this, or emerging brood and honey, where would I go? Well, usually the 2 combs. So this wall is the divider, correct? Because it's going to be over here. And so those 2 combs right there are pretty much the center of the brood nest. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to see what I can find right in here. So I may find 2 frames of emerging right there if that's what I'm looking for. Or I may find one there, replace the comb. I may find one down here because they've expanded down, and I did reverse them. I may find one there, replace the comb. A honey, I probably find a honey out here on the outside wall. So now I've taken 2 frames of brood and a frame of honey for my cell builder, replace the combs, put it back together, and move on to the next one. And that's what we do. We pull out what this nuke will give us, cover it back up, move on to the next one. And when we're done, we're going down the rows. And when we've harvested what we need for the day, and then we stop, make a mark, start here next time or whatever, and that's how we do it. And so every 4 days, we're pulling brood out to set up cell builders or whatever, and we continue around down the rows, and then we go to another new brood factory yard, of which I have 3. Now this one over here wasn't as strong, but it looks to me like it's building some population now, and so we'll probably give them a third story so that they can have enough room, and we'll zigzag, some combs in. We'll take those 2 combs out and put them in a empty box, and put some empty comb there, and put this on top, and put the empty combs to the outside, and zigzag. So this is your the same picture again after we put the empty combs in. And again, after adding combs. And then we're going to harvest emerging brood. So when we go through this, well, there's an emerging brood here and an emerging brood here. Everything else is mixed brood, is too young. Capped brood, if we're looking for emerging, capped brood won't work. You pick the cappings off a few cells and you see their purple eye or a very young pupae, and you can't use that because those won't be emerging for days and days and days, and they won't be those bees will not be old enough to be nurses when you need them to be. And maybe we'll take a frame of honey. Okay, so we took a frame of honey. So we took a frame of honey and an emerging there and replaced the combs, and we took an emerging here and replaced the comb, and we moved on to the next one. Well, sometimes I run out of comb. I mean, of course. Even though I have I don't know, a couple thousand combs maybe in storage area, I still run out. So I have to add foundation. And well, basically, it's the same as adding comb. So here we have a 3-story brood factory, and we want to add another story to that. Well, first off, we're going to harvest the emerging brood. Okay, so you see this capped brood, the time before this was capped. And when we get there the next few days or whenever, it's starting to emerge. So we pull it. So it's becoming emerging brood. So we pull that one and replace it with an empty. And this is the same one. We pull it and we replace it with an empty. And you can see how they change as they go in time. You know, well, anyway, so we're gonna add another story to this one. We only have foundation. Well, we do foundation the same way we do comb. Get a couple in, close to the divider and a couple out here. Now you're on a flow, so obviously the ones out on the top box to the side wall will be drawn out and they'll put nectar in it. Yes, of course. But these two here, they're surrounded by brood. They got brood above them and below them, and so chances are very good they'll draw that out and she'll lay in them. And so we pulled 2 emergings and we replaced it with empty comb and added the foundation and then you can see what happens as you progress. So those 2 foundations on the top box, well, they're eventually going to be honey. And that mixed brood is now capped. And that capped brood, well, we got there too late. So it emerged. But because it's in the top box, they filled it with nectar and pollen. Foundation was drawn out because it was in the sweet spot. And we go back there, you know, some days later, whenever it is, and it's mixed brood, which you would expect. The empty comb that was added to replace the emerging brood harvested is now mixed brood. The mixed brood was capped and is now emerging, so on and so forth. And so you can see the progression of what we're doing here. And so look at this one now. This one last time was mixed brood, and now it's capped, and now it's emerging. So actually, we're pulling those 2 combs of emerging brood, and that's how we do it. You know, you can't predict everyone. Everyone isn't the same. In fact, all bee colonies are individuals, so they all act a little differently. You just have to know what you're looking for, and then work through it and take what you need and make sure they stay with enough room so they don't swarm. Well, here you go. So now we're really building them up. So now the smallest ones have 3 boxes, 4 boxes, and some have 5 boxes. And some years we even get some with 6 boxes, but 5 right at this time is pretty good. I mean, if we're pulling brood regularly from them, 5 is pretty good. We've got some today we had to put 5. We've got 5 on early in the season, but I'm afraid there's going to be a big dandelion fruit bloom. So we have to be prepared. So then about, if I get to start on May 9th, setting up my first cell builders, my first queens are ready June 13th. Now, once we have mated queens ready to go, then we can start making nucleus colonies. And so nucleus colonies are basically the same way. But we're not focusing on harvesting emerging brood. We're harvesting capped brood and mixed brood, uncapped brood, and honey. So here's a 4-story new brood factory that we've actually added a 5th to. And what happens to the 5th when you have 5? Well, the top box or the top 2 boxes are honey. And then you're managing the brood nest down below so they don't swarm. And so now we're going to make some nucleus colonies. Well, so each nucleus colony gets a honey, a mixed brood, a capped brood, and an empty comb. So where does the honey? Well, right away I can say I can take that top box off and get 4 frames of honey. So here's my 4 nuke boxes. So I put a comb of honey in each one of them. Now, maybe it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, not 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because they're doubles. So you put a frame of honey at each on either side of the divider, and then you get look for a mixed brood. Well, what's the next? What's the next in this? So we've taken that brood away. We're going to leave that box of honey on top, of course. So, well, here's a capped brood. So there's a capped brood, a mixed brood. We don't take too much because I've got over 100, but we go down the rows. Take what they'll give us, make these nucleus colonies with enough bees to cover the brood and well onto the honey. Close them up. I mean, we don't close the entrance. Put the cover on. When we have that, we've got our nukes for the day, maybe 50. Load them on the truck, drive them to a nuke yard. I have apiaries that they're totally dedicated for holding nucleus colonies for wintering them. And then we give them a queen. Just give them a queen right then. Don't wait. Don't wait a day or 2 days or cut queen cells or all that noise. Right away. And some people object to that because they think they won't accept the queen if you don't wait until they know they're queenless. Well, I'll tell you what. In 2 hours they know they're queenless. Believe it. So we pull the cork on the candy end and give them the queens. And in fact, we made 352 last summer, and only 4 rejected their queens. So I think that this waiting for 24 hours or whatever, well, they start queen cells. And now it makes it more difficult. So you just give it to them immediately. And they accept them very well. And again, we make whole apiaries. This is another one of the apiaries that holds nucleus colonies. I don't know how many are here, 50, 60, something like that. This is how I keep my records. Um, but these are the temporary records, just the working sort of the working spreadsheet for the summer. So the first time we looked at this brood factory, this double nuke box brood factory, was on March 22nd of 2001. I mean, we looked for a cluster, we look for honey, and if they're good on both counts, okay, and they get marked okay. Then on could be 422. It's probably 422. Excuse me. You guys done? So on 422, we counted the frames of bees because it's really too early here to be ripping these nukes apart and looking at the brood and all. So we just count frames of bees. You can tip the boxes You unwrap, you tip the boxes, you estimate the cluster size in frames of brood, and you write it down on the tape. So the one on the left had 8 frames of brood, the one on the right had 4 frames of brood. By May 13th, they expanded into the 8 became 8 frames of brood, and the 4 became 5 frames of brood. Well, we harvested one, still early, so we're not really ripping a lot of brood out of them yet. Maybe 1, 2 from each one. This is a green dot queen, so we know what year she was. Somebody saw her. Whoever did this one saw the green dot queen, marked down this, so we know. If sometime we see an unmarked queen, well, we know that they changed their queen. The one on the right had 5 frames of brood, which isn't really too bad, but for May 13th, I'd like to see more. So somebody marked, this person marked requeen. On the 18th, we added the 5th box to the left-hand nuke and nothing to the right-hand nuke. And again, it was marked requeen. Well, then you can proceed through the summer from the 14th of June all the way until the 20th of July and see what we've done. You know, we took away 2 frames of brood from the left. Well, look at that. The right-hand one is now catching up. We had to take 4 frames of brood because they were getting so strong. Another green dot queen. And again, you know, 3 frames of brood and a frame of honey. So 3 frames of brood and a frame of honey on the 23rd. So we're obviously making nukes at this point. On the 5th of on July, we took a 1.5 nukes from either side. But the 5th of July, we're making them stronger. We're making our nukes with 3 frames of brood instead of 2 frames of brood. Why is that? Because we're trying to imitate where they would have been in strength if we had made them up on, say, June 15th, June 21st, or whatever. So by the time the 5th of July comes around, they've got 3 frames of brood already. Now, what happens is we're nearing the end of the flow on July 5th. Our basswood ends about July 15th, and that's it. That's it until goldenrod. The nucleus colonies made early in the season, oh, they draw several frames of foundation. The ones made after the 1st of July, once they get their population up to where they have the strength to draw foundation, the flow has ended. So we increase it by 1 frame of brood, trying to build a bigger population before the end of the flow. About the 20th, after we're done making nucleus colonies, say the 10th, now it's time for doing requeening. So we go through the operation, anything that's non-productive, mean, whatever, lagging, chalk brood. Well, I don't really see any yet. I saw 1 this year so far. We requeen. So because of the notation earlier in the season, we requeened the right-hand nuke. We killed the queen, KQ, and we added a daughter of breeder queen 84, and she was mated in 2021. Above that, 917, we're just estimating the weight of how much food needs to be fed to these nucleus colonies for winter. You know, usually it's 0, 1, or 2 is a lot. 3 is almost unheard of. But 2021 was a drought year. And the farther north you go in my area, if you get up towards the Canadian border, they were just severely dry. And so we had to feed more syrup. That's what all that means. The minus 25 is we took a box of honey off the top. And then we save it. If it's needed anywhere in the brood factories, we use it. And if it's not, we put it in the shop and extract it later. So yes, we requeen. So after, in our requeening process, you know, especially in brood factories, I need a prolific queen in brood factories. I don't need a queen that's going to run out of gas in May. So, or in, you know, in November, in October, and then winter weekly. So we replace anything that's 2 years old, anything that didn't produce well, anything that has issues, we requeen them. We have extra queens between the end of making nucleus colonies and about the first week of August. So, we have plenty of queens to do this. Well, I use push-in cages. Always use a push-in cage. I never remove a laying queen from a colony and then try to get them to accept a cage a queen in a wooden cage or any kind of cage. What's happening here is you catch your queens. I catch my queens. You maybe buy them through the mail, but I catch my queens, bring them home, put them on the table, give them a drop of water. I cage every queen. Nobody else cages my queens. I see every one. If I find a runt, I destroy her. No runts get caged. Nothing with small abdomens, little dinky queens. They don't get caged. They get destroyed. So I know my queens have big abdomens. They're beautiful big queens. You put them on the table overnight. You go look at them in the morning, and they've shrunken up. Their abdomens have shrunken. So now they look like smaller queens. So now you're going to take a laying queen with a nice plump abdomen and pheromones and galore and like that, and you're going to get rid of her, and you want to give them a non-laying queen in a cage. I didn't say non-mated. I said non-laying. She's not a laying queen. She's a mated queen. She doesn't act like a laying queen. So when she comes out of that cage, why? She's not a laying queen. They have a laying queen. Heck with that. They don't want that thing. And they destroy her and raise their own. So what we do is we find a frame of emerging brood and nectar. We brush all the bees off, and we locate the cage over the emerging brood. That's the emerging brood, and some cells of nectar. No bees. We release the queen into that cage and push the cage into the midrib and leave it for 4 days. In that 4 days, she starts to lay because the emerging bees, they have never seen a queen before. They don't know any other queen but this one. So they groom her, they feed her. There's open brood, there's open nectar. They feed her. She starts to lay. They feed her through the cage. You pull the comb out with the cage, and you can touch the bees on the cage, and they're not defensive at all. If they were defensive, they'd be stuck on that cage like Velcro. But they're not. They're nice and loose. So here's typical. There's the queen in the bottom right. There's all these bees have emerged from the brood. They're all feeding her. Now I say 4 days. Why 4 days? Well, when do eggs hatch? Eggs hatch on the 3rd day, right? So you remove the old queen, you locate the cage, and you pull it out on day 4. Lo and behold, there are eggs outside the cage. Uh-oh. Guess what? Multiple queens in that hive. So now you have to go back through it and get that second queen out. If there was no second queen, there wouldn't be eggs outside the cage, and then you're good to go. So there are no eggs outside the cage. It's time to pull the cage off. When you pull the cage off, you make sure the queen is on the comb, not on the cage, because sometimes she'll be on the cage. You pull the cage, turn it like that, and off she goes. So you make sure she's on the comb. And it's amazing though, when you pull that, this cage has not been off these bees for, gosh, a minute. She's already walked out of her imprint. I mean, she's on sealed brood, so that's obviously not her brood. They immediately form a retinue around her. She's all plumped up. She's laying. That's exactly what they want. Job done. Easy. So now, after making nucleus colonies, this is what they look like on the left. They often have, at this point, we're not pulling honey. Oftentimes they'll have 2 boxes of honey. I winter them in 3. I'd like to see a box of honey on top. Well, so that's what the goldenrod flow here is. This goldenrod flow for us is our winter feed for the bees, most of it, because we super in a way so that I don't want my brood nests to be plugged with summer honey. So we over super maybe a little so that the brood nests are are light. Then when we harvest the honey, we let them have the goldenrod, and this is so this is typical even in the nucleus colonies. So you see what's happened. There was 2 frames of foundation and an empty comb in the second box down, and a good goldenrod flow will take care of that. Done. And then down below, you can see how things have changed, how a mixed brood has become a cap, how nectar pollen has become a mix. There's some extra honey. So this colony is looking pretty good. Um, I can take off that top box, so there's 25 pounds of honey. This colony has 4, 5, 6 frames of honey already. I'd like to see the top two boxes full of honey when we winter, and maybe some more out here. So maybe this nectar pollen and this mixed brood will become either nectar pollen or maybe some capped honey on the outside. That's what the goldenrod flow does for us. Last year was a 0 goldenrod flow. Didn't even smell it, and so we had to feed a lot of sugar. So as I say, so that one on the left is ready for harvest, and the one on the right is after the harvest, and now we let them build up, store whatever goldenrod they can, and if they're too light for winter, we feed them. Now, this is always the snag, isn't it? You know, how do you deal with colonies that still have honey supers on and your varroa mite load is exploding? So, production highs, we got to get the honey off before too late in August or we start to have issues. Fruit factories don't seem to have that problem, not so critically. Um, years ago when we first started wintering nucleus colonies, it was to help us with tracheal mites. And so we could winter nucleus colonies above production highs, 2 nucleus colonies above production highs. And in the springtime, the production hive would be dead and the nucleus colonies would be thriving. Same bees, same brood. What happened? Well, nucleus colonies and tracheal mites. Tracheal mites, brood that's emerging have no tracheal mites. There are no tracheal mites inside the cell when the brood is capped. So they come out and then they have to get infested. Well, here you go, have this little colony that's they're outbreeding the tracheal mite. And so the tracheal mite never has a chance. They can't build up a population that's high enough to kill the colony or even affect the colony really. And so that was one of the unique features of nucleus colonies. Well, in a way, I think that nucleus colonies are doing the same thing with varroa. I think they have an ability to outbreed the varroa mites, as long as you're not starting with a brood source that has a high infestation of varroa. And remember, in brood factories, we're pulling brood out all the time to make nucleus colonies, to make cell builders. So we're pulling a lot of brood out of each one of these, and that's where the mites are. So you're pulling the brood out, it's got some mites in it, and it goes in the cell builders, and so when you're done raising cells, you better do something about the cell builders because they've got a big population of varroa mites. But the nucleus colony brood factories, they seem to be able to outbreed it at least until later in the season. So that gives you options on treating varroa mites. So this year, instead of using miticides, we're trying oxalic and sugar syrup drizzle, and gosh, they look good this spring. We're seeing very few mites, of course. I found early spring sampling doesn't do much good because you come up with zeros, but there's really mites there. They're all in the drone brood. So it's really too early to tell yet. We'll know soon enough, but I think it's helping. And so now as we're reversing colonies and brood factories and whatever, we're putting oxalic glycerin pads in, and hopefully that will enable each colony to at least get through August, at least get us to the point where we can do something about the Varroa population instead of having them crash when their supers on and all like that. So you've all been there, I'm sure. So after we get treated, we're done treated. We did harvest. We treated. Now we have to feed them for winter. And if you look back a couple of slides back, you can see in a three-story brood factory, I'd like to have the two top boxes full of honey and the bottom box maybe with some. And here again, here's the same slide of my summer information, but you can see that the ones up on top needed at least 3 gallons. 3 plus 3, that's insane. I've never had to feed so much. But this is how we feed. So there's a feed hole in the inner cover, and we put in some 3/8 shims. And above the feed hole, we have 2 gallons of syrup that meet right directly above the feed hole. They'll take down 2 gallons in, gosh, if they're strong enough, they'll take down 2 gallons in, a few days. And if they needed 3, you can put the other one on. We used to put on one, come back, put on another one, come back, put on another one. Put on 2 at once, and they'll take them both down, boom. And so, this would be 2 gallons on each nuke, and then a shell, an empty high body shell around it, and the lid on top. And sometimes my shells are getting a little rough, and so we put some duct tape on to keep the robbers at bay. But it's not really too bad because, it's not dripping, and so they do pretty well on it like that. The whole idea of feeding 2 gallons at a time, I want the bees to take the syrup down as fast as they can. I'm trying to recreate a nectar flow. You put on a quart or whatever syrup on at a time, and you come back and it's always empty. And you fill it and you come back and it's empty, and you fill it and you come back and it's empty. So you're feeding them a little bit at a time. And then you go check the colony, and gosh, they haven't put any weight on, but they got a heck of a population. And so all you've been doing is stimulating brood rear because you're only putting on bits at a time, quart at a time. Well, here I'm putting on 8 quarts at a time, and it's gone in 4 or 5 days. Well, what's happening? They're taking it down and they're storing it in the comb as they should, and they even cap it. In a production hive with a bottom board, I mean, you can see wax scales all over the place. So if it's early enough, if it's mid-September into early October up here in my territory, they're going to store it away and ripen it. And that's the key to feeding up in the north here, is to get them to ripen that syrup. It's got to be ripe. It can't be even 2 to 1. 66%, 65 is about the best I can do. 65% um, sugar. It's still got water to evaporate. So you let them do it. You let them ripen it. That's very important. Okay? And then we have to wrap. So I put tar paper wraps around all my hives and all my nukes. And it's not for insulation; it's for solar gain. So in a cold day in the wintertime, um, the sun is usually out, and it heats that black paper up, and helps them in the hive. It maybe just warms it up a little so they can go bring in some feed from outside the cluster. So this is after our first snow this past autumn. Some gosh, maybe November, early November. Um, and so this is you can see the bottom entrances. So each nuke has an entrance. So for instance, the second stack over, the second double over, it's got a light colored box on top and gray on the right. You see that hole up there? That's an entrance. That's an upper entrance. And that's a 3/4 inch auger hole. And down here under the snow is the bottom entrance, which they would be using if there wasn't snow on the ground. But there is, and there will be. And most of the winter, those bottom entrances will be covered with snow. And so they need an upper entrance, number one, so that if a cleansing flight presents itself, we go months without a cleansing flight, sometimes 4 months. 3 months is not uncommon. 3 or 4 months, my gosh, they can go all that amount of time. So they're in tight cluster, quiet like this. Yes, they can. But when that cleansing flight possibility comes, they don't have an upper entrance, they can't take the flight. Also, there's been a lot of discussion about upper entrances and talking about heat loss, and you shouldn't have upper entrances and all this. I won't say anything about that, but you do. We do. You go out on a cold morning in the wintertime, early morning, and you'll see horizontal icicles sticking out of the upper entrance. So you think about all the moisture that's leaving these colonies. Um, they're not hungering for water. They get plenty of water for their consumption. I don't see too dry, but I don't see wet. I don't see mold. So upper entrances to me are critical. This is this is my cell building yard. These are all brood factories and probably 3 and 4 stories high, wrapped up for winter. And directly over to your right, out of sight, are all the cell builders. So, when we're harvesting brood for cell builders, we harvest it here, we take it over there and put it on the cell building colony. It's great. I got two brood factories that are at distance, but working on this one is great. And this is there's a lot of hives here. There's 30 something cell builders and 60 something brood factories. A lot of bees surrounded by corn, doing pretty good. So here I'm putting on a wrapper. We actually use it's 15-pound felt, 78 inches long, folded in half the lengthwise and cut along the crease. And we put one on the bottom and then put one on the top and overlap and staple it in the back along the seam put a staple next to the upper entrances so that the paper stays against the box and the bees won't get stuck behind it. And tie the covers down. I tie all my covers down. Boy, it's a good thing we had them tied down this year, huh? Did you get a windy winter? It's still going. Still, last week we had big winds day after day after day. But tied down, no problem. They do not come off when they're tied down. Even if if the hive blows over, the cover won't come off. I've seen hives blow over, get covered with snow. The bottom board came off. They're wide open at the bottom. They survive. If the cover comes off, they're dead. Let's see, where's that? Oh, you can see we also add a piece of 2-inch styrofoam, rigid foam on the inner covers. This insulates the inner covers so that there's no condensation on the underside of the inner covers. which freezes and then thaws and drips on the bees, and the bees get wet, and wet bees are dead bees. This allows the excess water vapor to leave as water vapor and not condense. So that's another important part of the wrapping that we do. So this is about, I don't know, a minute, a minute after I wrap it, cold day. And they're already looking out. You feel that dark paper, it's 100 and whatever, warm. So actually, tell me, what are we doing with these bees? You know, talk all about making cell builders and making nucleus colonies. And, it's sort of like this. You start in the spring and you build them up and you build them up and you build them up a little more and you get a bunch of combs and she's raising a bunch of brood. Then you start harvesting the brood for cells, for cell building. And you replace the combs and you harvest some more and you replace the combs. And then you start making nucleus colonies and you harvest some nucleus colonies, then you replace the combs. But pretty soon, we really go after making nucleus colonies. And so we're going to make nucleus colonies out of these brood factories, and we're going to take them all the way down to 3 or maybe 4 frames of brood left in the bottom 2 boxes with the queen, and then let them go. And let them go for that goldenrod flow. And they build right back up again, and they make nice populations. And so then we take them down. We've taken them down from sometimes 5, 4, down into 3 stories. And when we're creating the nukes, and then we winter them, and they become perennial. So the brood factories are perennial. They're not temporary. Okay, that's why we don't sacrifice them anymore, because we can use them again next year and the next year. And they're perennial. The only thing we have to do is change the queen when necessary. But we keep wintering them year after year. So obviously, all of this is not coming from a single-use resource hive, right? You understand that. These brood factories are, I mean, you could have a small apiary and have one double nuke box with, 3 or 4 supers on top and use that brood in your apiary. I mean, think about those colonies that are struggling to make the population large enough to harvest a crop. Well, you take the brood out and you boost them, as Brother Columban did. You know, you can make some more nucleus colonies. You can make your friends' nucleus colonies. If you had more colonies in your apiaries, you could start raising your own queens, and you can use your brood source. It doesn't have to be your production hives, so you can let your production hives be production hives, and you let your brood factories be brood factories, and you're going to be a lot better off, believe it. And all this comes from brood factories. It's incredible. I mean, how many resources we take out of these things it just blows my mind still. It still does after all these years. Anyway, my friend Wilson here, our Maremma, and thanks for listening.
Mike, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Excellent. It's Landy Simone.
Hi, Landy.
Thank you for a terrific presentation. And is this the dog that was barking?
No, this is actually Wilson. I mentioned his name and he starts whining, but no. No, the other one is Gemma. She's a beast. I don't know if you can see her over there.
Yeah, there. Okay, there we go.
She's stronger. She's stronger than I am. I have to take her for a walk in a while, and it's not always easy. But they're both Maremma sheepdogs, so
That's great.
livestock guard. They're excellent. Gosh, what excellent dogs. Anyway.
That's wonderful. So I really enjoyed this very much, and I never realized it, but I'm making my own brood factories. I just never called them that.
Right.
And I've got
As I
a
said,
couple
not
of
new.
questions. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but it's great. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Mhm.
One, you say you're doing the oxalic acid dribble for the first time this year, and that you're going to use these, oxalic acid pads. What have you done in years past, and how successful has it been for Varroa?
Well, I've done everything. Haven't you? I
Well,
mean, come on.
yeah,
Well, I mean, take back. No, not checkmate, but everything. Apistan.
I don't put formic on my nukes.
I don't put formic on anything because it's worthless,
It's
in my opinion. I don't get
uh,
good control here with formic. I don't get good control with oxalic vapors.
huh.
And you do it after the colonies are broodless and they're so tight clustered that the vapors don't penetrate.
You're too far north. It's too cold
Too
up
far
there.
north. That's
It
right.
works well for us around
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, and then
Uh-huh.
again coming out of winter.
And around
But we're
Thanksgiving, we are frozen. We are frozen
yeah,
solid, so
it's two
doesn't
different
work.
areas.
Yeah,
But we're losing. A lot of us are losing the efficacy of Apivar,
exactly.
and I won't. Formic Pro works very nicely for us in summer on production colonies, but nucleus colonies typically are a little bit too weak and too vulnerable for that very strong treatment. I've been using Apigard. I used to use Apivar, but it's not working anymore. So
And it
it's
costs
kind
too
of,
much.
yeah, and it costs a lot of money.
It
But I'm
does.
curious about the oxalic acid dribble you're using. Those colonies are full of brood. Are you getting
No,
efficacy,
no,
or
we
when
did
are you
not.
doing it?
We waited until there was no brood.
Okay. And you're
So
not getting
then
die off of the bees?
it's not temperature sensitive. It's not tight cluster sensitive.
Okay.
And so
And
that was in November.
all right.
And we had great weather oh my gosh, we had good weather for it this year, 50s, 60, t-shirts, drizzling. It's excellent. And they were broodless. So, from the looks of it this spring, it helped.
That's great. So I guess
So now,
whereas
not last year. So then this year, we're going to try the oxalic glycerin pads. All I'm asking is that we get to broodless time and not
August.
have the bees dying, not have them crashing,
Yeah.
so that and even if I have to go back to a chemical control because the pads, if they can get me to that point, that they're not crashing in August before I can get the honey off.
Wow.
I think that's going to be a big step forward. But it's
Um,
not just that; it's also the breeding program we're running. We got a pretty nice. We're working with the University of Vermont Bee Lab. We've got a really sizable grant. They're taking all kinds of tests, nosema and whatever. And they did liquid nitrogen frozen brood assay last year, and that was kind of funny because everyone's learning how to do it. And it was, I mean, how do you freeze brood and the next day their brood is emerging? No. No, it didn't. Did it not die? It did not die. In fact, it lived. So, but whatever. But we've been approved for the
so
new assay. Do you know what the new assay is? The unhealthy brood odor assay. It was discovered by Kara Wagner down in University of North Carolina, and it seems that when you do the frozen brood assay, it's measuring dead brood. It's picking up death.
right.
And they can find it, and they're looking for death in the unhealthy brood odor assay. They're looking for unhealthy brood high varroa load, even virus load with no varroa. They're sensitive to it. And so she's isolated the chemicals that the bees zero in on, and you can spray it on in a plastic circular thing that covers 20 cells. You spray it, put it back in the colony. You come back 2 hours later. If it's over 60% uncapped, you got a good one. It's amazing. 2 hours. So we've been
That's terrific.
So we've been approved for use of that too. So that, and they even gave us more money so that we could go longer. So
That's really exciting. Where can I get some of that stuff?
you can't yet. You can't yet, but you could see the video. So Inside the Hive TV. Do you know that blog?
Yes.
Umberto Bonacristiani. Yes, Inside the Hive TV. And if you go on his blog history, you could probably find Kara Wagner's talk about the UBO. It's fascinating. And
Kara Wagner. That is really interesting.
It really is. I'm real excited. I'm pumped. So in the last how many years, there's been a few things that have come along that make me excited, but only a few. In 2013 at the National Honey Show, what's her name? Did a talk about ghosts in the hive, and she showed that the varroa mites take on the odor of the colony, and so that's why the bees don't see them, don't recognize them. And then of course there was Dr. Sam's talk about fat bodies, which blew everybody's mind.
Yeah.
And now there's an actual, it's a way to measure VSH without having to open 1,500 cells looking for single foundress mites. Who's got time for that? So I'm real pumped about this.
It does sound exciting. Let me see if there's some other questions here. Guys, yes, we got a question in the back here. Hold on. I'm going to pass the mic over. Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, can you stop screen sharing so that we can see your face?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Okay. Oh, stop sharing. I got it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike.
Hey.
Hey, I noticed that all the wrapping you do in the fall for the winter time, and that must be an incredible job to go through and wrap all of these hives. How do you manage that? You just do it, or?
Yeah, just do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I got 3 employees. That helps.
Yeah.
It doesn't really take that long. It probably takes us a week or 10 days.
All right. Thanks.
Hello, Mike. Do you ever experiment with these drone frames in the springtime for varroa?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea if you have few enough colonies. I don't see why not. Why not? Was it Kirsten that did that? I believe so. And she just had what? She had two combs. I think she took maybe a shallow frame and put it in a deep and over near the edges, maybe one in, and then every time she opened it, she scraped the drones off, and they rebuilt it. I think that's a good thing. That's a good IPM approach to help you with varroa. I've got too many bees. I couldn't possibly do that. I wish I could.
All right. Well, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
You got any more questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. Some of your hives had a deep box at the bottom, are those divided also into two mediums, two nooks, or
Yeah,
how
and
does that work?
some of my hive stands are just old boxes,
Okay.
empty boxes on the ground, and then the nuke, the brood factory sits on top. So that's probably what you're seeing.
I thought that when you had you had the hives open, that the bottom one was a deep one.
Well, the bottom box of of all my nucleus colonies, brood factories and regular, it is a 10 frame divided box.
Okay.
Sometimes that's on a hive stand, and sometimes it's on an empty box that I use as a hive stand.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have more questions? No? Nobody else? I guess we're good. We're going to let you, we're going to
Walk
loose.
my dogs. Yeah, but well,
Yes.
I have one thing to say, and unfortunately, I don't know how to share anything here, and I usually share something at the end. But anyway, I have a GoFundMe this year for the Mexican kids in Oaxaca that are studying beekeeping. And a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I had one. I didn't reach my goal, but I brought them almost $7,000. And it was intended to, to go to the school that I was working with, to improve their beekeeping equipment and, give them veils and suits and everything that the kids needed for the classes. And one of my partners down there, Javier, he went to the school and he kind of said, well, maybe it would not be a good idea to give the money to the school. Let's figure out a way to get the money to the kids. So he did. He got the money. We helped the kids in 2 schools, all the beekeeping kids in 2 different schools. They each got a suit and gloves and a veil and a hive tool and a smoker and a beehive full of bees, and it's their own thing, and they can take it home and they can do with it. They can learn, they can possibly have some income for their family or their future family. I really fell in love with the folks down there, and it's pretty easy to see why. They're so nice, they're so kind to me. Oh my gosh. But for instance, I'm in Veracruz and I met a woman, and man, we were attracted to each other, but she was 92 years old, you understand, and she was the elder of the beekeeping community. And I gave her a Vermont beekeeping cap and some comb honey, and I'm sitting with her on Sunday at the meeting, and she says through an interpreter that nobody's ever given her anything. Anybody important's never spoken to her before, But she was such an interesting person, having kept bees since she was 14. And so we're trying to speak to each other, and she says to me, Senor, I can speak to you, and you don't know what I'm saying, and and you can speak to me, and I don't know what you're saying, but that doesn't matter. and I said, Senora, what does matter? ¿Qué es importante? What's important? El corazón, the heart. Oh my God, she absolutely melted me. Okay, and that's how it is for me down there, and so they're so appreciative of any kind of help that you can give them. And so now I have another fund, and I don't have the address here because I don't know how to share anything on this site, on this platform. But I have on my YouTube, I have another fund. So if you search on my page, you'll see it. It's help the Mexican kids in Oaxaca. My goal was 10,000. I'm already over 11. All my fees for Zooms have gone to the fund. Some people have been just overly generous. Somebody gave $2,500, but with $10,000, we're going to help the kids in four schools or maybe 5 schools and get them started with it. So, if you can do it, please. If you can't, I understand. If it's $5 or $10 or $50 or whatever, if you can do it, and if you feel comfortable about it, please do. And
Mike, we will
please send it. there.
we'll get that link posted on our website and on our Facebook page. And
Great.
I'm going to send you information about our Jersey project for Villages in Partnership, where
Mhm.
we're working with the people, villagers, really extremely poor people in Malawi, Africa. Tim
Mhm.
Schuler is the head of our B team.
Right.
And we have already raised, I think our goal is about $50,000. And I hopefully will be going to Malawi this coming year with Tim, in February. But just a couple of hives and the resources in those hives can make an enormous difference to a family. So we understand. I'll send you that information and we'll post your information
I'll look for it.
about las escuelas en Oaxaca
Sí.
y la gente ahí.
Mhm. Escuela técnica número 14.
Y muchas gracias.
Mi español es mucho mejor. Mucho mejor. Yo tengo una trabajador de Querétaro, and absolutely fantastic guy to work with. I love it. So that's what I mean. There's things that excite me, and I'm willing to stay in this business as long as I can. That's where I'm at right now.
That's great. May you drop dead in the back of a bee yard when you're somewhere in your hundreds.
Yeah, right. With my head stuck in a beehive. Exactly.
That's what I want.
Well, I'm with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. We really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you for allowing us to record it so that we can share it with other members.
Yeah, please do.
And we'll bid you a good night.
You all take care.
Thank you.